Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Civil Defense, which is episode 7 of season 3 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a Patreon requested video, requested by Patreon Quack Addict. Thanks so much, Quack Addict, for your support and suggesting this video. So in this video I will review the episode of Deep Space Nine called Civil Defense. So Civil Defense is the episode where Sisko and Jake and O'Brien accidentally trigger a Cardassian security program, which puts the station in lockdown because it thinks it's still in Cardassian times and that there's a Bajoran revolt. So one thing leads to another and everyone ends up being trapped somewhere in the station, and the station, the more they try to break free of the program, the worse they make things for themselves, and eventually the whole station is going to self-destruct. So Sisko and Kira finally get together and are able to overcome the self-destruct program and win the day. So this has always been one of my favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine. Now, I particularly love Season 3. I know not a lot of people do. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, season of Deep Space Nine. And the thing with Season 3 of Deep Space Nine is quite different than some other seasons I love. Like, the other season of Deep Space Nine I really like is Season 6. And with Season 6, they have a lot of, amazing episodes, but a lot of shitty episodes as well. Where Season 3, I think, is more consistent. Like, the episodes aren't quite as amazing, but they don't really have anything as shitty either. It's, consistently good throughout the season. Like, there's a few stinkers in there, but even those are not that bad. So with Civil Defense always... So unlike with Season 6, with Season 3, there's not one or two episodes that point to and be those are the best, those are amazing. It's just a consistent level of quality throughout the season, and basically just the overall picture of Deep Space Nine they paint. I think this is the characters at their best. This is the classic Deep Space Nine. Whereas I think the waters get muddied a bit with Season 4 and 5, which I didn't care for as much, which I know is very unpopular. But this example is a prime example for me where all the characters are at their best. And plus it's just a really good suspense episode. I think this is a really good example of a thriller, a really high tension, high stakes, edge of your seat thriller where I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I was in this tense mood the whole time. The characters are constantly in peril, and the peril just keeps getting worse and worse, and the tension just keeps rising and rising. And that's part of what I love about this episode. I gotta be honest, when I saw the preview for this episode and it was said it was going to be about some Cardassian virus taking over the station, I was like, yeah, that sounds boring. That sounds like something we've already seen. But it's not. It's funny. This is kind of some people compare it to the Next Generation episode Disaster, because it's a bit of a disaster style episode, which Deep Space Nine will do the following year as well with Starship Down. But I personally think this is the better episode of that, where some disaster strikes, in Next Generation, they hit some quantum filament or whatever. My brother used to call it a space quake or a space earthquake because it came off as basically an earthquake episode. But in this one, of course, it's a Cardassian security virus that takes over the station. They think it's still in the occupation times and there's Bajoran revolt. And so that's a lot more tense, in my opinion, than a quantum filament or space quake, whatever the hell that thing is. So I think the stakes are higher, the tension's higher, and plus, but it's similar like this in Starship Down and Disaster, because they follow the same sort of disaster movie outline. That is, you have different characters trapped in different places throughout the station or ship. And so you had the grouping and they had to work together. And in this case, you have Sisko, O'Brien, and Jake, who start the whole thing, because they're mucking around in ore processing, trying to turn it into something else, and they start the whole thing, and so they have to escape from ore processing, and then by doing so, it causes the program to get a lot worse. So these three are on their own, and then you have the main crews and ops with Kira, Dax, and Bashir. And eventually Garak joins them in ops as well. So you have the 4 of them in ops. And then Dukat also joins them in ops. So you have the 5 of them there. And then you have Odo and Quark in the security center as well. Where I think their storyline most reminds me of a disaster type episode or film, because you always have these 2 characters who are trapped in one place and they have to talk it out, and you get character interactions with them, while the other locations everyone's like mucking around trying to solve a crisis. And the TNG episode Disaster, it was Geordi and Beverly who were trapped in like a cargo bay or something. And in Starship Down, it was Dax and Bashir who were trapped in some quarter, and they like hashed it out. But here it's Quark and Odo who are just trapped in the office, which probably is why is my least favorite of the main storylines. I usually love Quark and Odo, don't get me wrong. I think their interactions are always golden. I'm a big Quark and Odo fan. And but this episode, it wasn't all that good. I think they weren't at their best here. Some of their banter is kind of tired, and for the most part, since they weren't really involved in the main storyline, I just wanted them to get back to the other storylines that were involved in the main storyline and trying to solve the crisis. So what I think, and you had that really high tension. I love how how the episode balloons out, where it starts out where just Jake, O'Brien and Cisco in danger because they're mucking around the ore processing and they're going to get killed. But when they escape, they put the whole promenade at risk. So then Kira tries to do things and solve the station, and that puts the entire station at risk. And then Garak comes on using his Cardassian codes, and he tries to help, and then that materializes a freaking disruptor from the replicators, and it starts killing people. So it's like, the more they try to solve the issue, the worse things get. And I love that. I think that created a nice flow to the episode, as I said, a nice amount of tension that I cannot undersell. The amount of, I think this is one of the most beautiful, best Star Trek episodes of the entire franchise as far as suspense goes, of keeping you on the edge of your seat, keeping you in peril, keeping you suspense. But more than that, I think there are a lot of good character interactions in this episode, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of because the thing with Quark and Odo is, he's like, Odo says, "Oh, you're devious," and at the end of the episode, he's like, "Oh, I'm lying, you're not really devious, your brother's more devious than you," and that's a bit silly. He doesn't think Rom's more devious than Quark, so I don't know, like, the whole interaction between them, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't at its best. To me, it was kind of the low point of the episode. But you had some amazing character interactions with Kira in command of ops, and Bashir as well. Dax is more like the technician trying to tell you what the computer does and telling you how you fucked up. But it was interesting seeing Kira's sort of tempered, shall we say, not tempered, but hot-tempered sort of instinctual way of command, as opposed to Cisco's more thoughtful way of command, and how sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. It was just an interesting take on that. But what I absolutely love was Garak. As I said, Garak is my favorite character of Deep Space Nine, and I think season 3 is when Garak really came into his own, and this episode in particular was a great Garak episode. I mean, the banters between him and Julian are always magnificent. They're always really good. But in this episode, I think it was particularly good. And I love how Garak was actually trying to help. And because I don't think that goes against his character. Because it was kind of out of self-interest, but really he could have saved himself. He could have just left the station, but he needs the station to live in, because that's the only place he can live and being safe. I think that's referenced several times before, that if he went somewhere else, he wouldn't be as safe. So he wants to save the station so he can live there. So it's kind of self-interest, but in the process, he is helping save a lot of lives. So I did like that, and I liked seeing the interactions between him and Bashir, like, when Garak was sort of operating the Cardassian computer system and trying to rewrite the program and manipulate it, and Bashir was just smiling, and Garak's like, what are you smiling about? And he's like, I wonder how many other tailors can rewrite Cardassian programs, security programs like this. And he's like, well, I wouldn't venture a guess. Oh, that reminds me, by the way, Doctor, your pants are ready to be picked up. Just that interaction is absolutely great. But of course, it gets the best when Gul Dukat shows up. I love Gul Dukat. And this is one of the few episodes, in fact, perhaps the only one, where you really get the Gul Dukat and Garak rivalry. Like, it was hinted at in the episode Cardassians in season 2, but here you get to see them confront each other. You get to see them really go at it, and sometimes they just bicker at each other, but it's believable. And Dukat was so good in this episode. Now, I have recently heard the opinion that some people didn't like Dukat because he came off as a mustache twirly, stereotypical villain, evil, I'm evil, bad guy. And I very highly disagree with that, personally, just myself. Because while he does come off as a villain, but I think that's where he works best. And maybe I'm of opposite mind of some people, but I think Dukat always works best as a villain. And like season 4 and season 5, and when I cover those seasons, I'll get to this more. I didn't like what they did with Dukat. They were making him too much like a hero, too much like an ally, which I think kind of muddied his character. So I think it's the end of season 5, they corrected that by making him the big villain. In season 6, he continued to be the big villain. Season 7, well, maybe they went a little bit overboard with the villainy in season 7, but it still worked for me. And in this episode, in season 3, for the most part, he was the villain. Like in the episode, there's another episode later on, Defiant, where Dukat is a bit less of a villain, so again, he's a bit less interesting to me. Episodes like this, I think it perfectly describes the character of Dukat, and Dukat at his best, where he's just being all arrogant and being. I love the way when he shows up on the ops, and there's the replicator disruptor shooting everyone. He's just sitting there casually drinking a coffee, and while everyone's like cowering and being shot by this like disruptor going off that vaporizes people. And he's just like, oh, how blah 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 blah. Oh, and Bashir's like, well, if you can help us, why don't you do it? He's like, oh, and all in good time. And then like Kira yells at him, and he's like, well, I think you'll find, Major, that I don't respond well to that tone. Just that arrogance was so brilliant. And then he goes to Kira and tries to negotiate the Cardassians coming back on the station, which, of course, Kira is like, well, I'd rather blow up the station, which is great. But I cannot underscore. I would have to say this is probably one of the best moments in the entire show for me. After that blustering, after that arrogance, after that, oh, well, maybe I'll save you, maybe I won't, well, ho, 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 ho. And he calls up the transporter to transport out, and the program then switches to his Legate or someone like over his head. It's like, Dukat, I see you cowardly trying to evacuate and run away and leave your post. Well, I'm not going to allow it, so I'm rescinding all of your command codes are rescinded. You're going to be stuck in the station. You're going to die like everyone else. And the look on Dukat's face where it's like, ha, 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 ha. Was golden. It was beautiful. It was amazing. It was definitely one of my favorite moments of the entire show. I was like, I love that. That was so awesome. That was a clap and cheer moment. Now, some people, I've heard the opinion of some people saying that was a bit too silly and too over the top, but I, again, completely disagree. No, it was not too silly. It was perfect. It was beautiful. It was awesome. And also, this is the episode where they really start to play on the Dukat and Kira romance. And I actually like it better in this episode because they don't. In this episode, you don't necessarily could see it as Dukat crushing on Kira. I think in later seasons he crushes on her a bit too much and they go overboard with it. But here, like, he didn't even notice. You just think it's normal bluster. But then Garak points out, "Oh, we might as well stop it. She's not interested in you." And I love that. It was amazing. Dukat's just like, "Garak, I should have killed you." He's like, "Well, you tried." I mean, just the interaction, the back and forth between the characters was brilliant. Absolutely amazing. But this is where they originated the whole Dukat crushing on Kira thing, because this is the first time it was mentioned, and then later episodes they took that and they ran with it. In fact, in this episode alone, you could say that Garak was just full of shit and Dukat actually wasn't crushing on Kira, but in later episodes they make it very clear that he is. So I don't know, I didn't like that as much as this here. I thought the interactions between them was absolutely great. And just the whole episode was suspenseful. But now I should get into some of my slight criticisms of the episode. What I think are downsides of the episode. First of all, I mean, I love the Cardassian computer program because, I'm still staying on positives, but I love the Cardassian computer program because it shows that the station, because people are getting comfortable in the station. Like, even at the start of the third season, Jake came to Cisco and was like, "Oh, this is home. We're home." And they talked about how everyone's comfortable here now. But this episode is a great reminder that this used to be a Cardassian torture center, basically, where they drive slave labor and drive people to work them to death. And so it's not like... It has a dark history, and I love that this dark history comes to bite them back on the ass. But now, I'll get into some of my criticism, is that the downside of that is I don't really buy this computer program exists. Because, alright, it's meant to operate, it thinks it's still during the occupation, it's meant to operate during the occupation. So you gotta think... If this was during the occupation, then Dukat and the others would still be there. So why do they need this computer program? Why do they have to have... And someone, I think, made a joke once of Dukat. The way he plays up and he has different scenarios, it kind of seems like a computer game or one of those games that had the pre-recorded scenarios. "Oh, I see that you got this far, so now we can..." He kind of came off as that, and I don't really buy. Like, why would he need to do that if he's still there? I mean, I think it's only at one stage later in the program that they assume that Dukat or the Cardassian forces are, sedated or overpowered. For most of it, they don't assume that. So if they're still capable, why don't they just say this shit themselves? Why don't they operate the things themselves? Why do they need an independent computer program to do it for them? So all of that seems like convenient just so they could have a plot in this episode, because they need to have a plot. So I don't really think this program in itself is actually that practical or realistic, but I just love the episode, so who cares? I'm willing to overlook that because the rest of the episode is so great. I already talked about how the Quark and Odo stuff didn't work quite as well for me. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much as far as the ending of the episode. Probably not the best. It kind of ends in just a, I don't know, I almost call it anticlimactic. Like, it was kind of predictable. It was kind of by the numbers. Like, Cisco and O'Brien had to crawl through the fiery Jeffrey tubes or whatever they call them on Deep Space Nine, and insert different chips into the different place, and then they get the thing to blow to save the station from blowing up. That doesn't. Yeah, I think that has the much suspense and all the tension that was building like throughout the entire episode. They kind of solved it rather easily, and as I said, like throughout the whole episode, things every time they tried to do something, it got worse and worse and worse. But then all of a sudden, all they need to do is move some chips around, and they solved the problem. So that was a bit too easy, in my opinion. I think the ending could have been better. But other than that, Amazing episode. So my rating for Civil Defense out of 10 is a 9 excellent. Hessa said I'm not going to give it a 10 because the ending could have been better, mainly because of that. But almost give it a 10. I was this close to giving it a 10, so I would call this a very, very strong 9. I think it's definitely one of the best of the show. Absolutely love the character interactions. Love the back and forth between Garak and Dukat and Kira. Is just amazing, and the tension and the suspense in this episode was amongst the best in the entire Star Trek franchise. Anyway, that is it for my review of Civil Defense. If you would like to support my channel and Patreon, it would be very much appreciated. $1 or more will get you access to my Patreon-only video series. At the moment, I'm doing my top 10 most underrated movies of all time. You also get access to my schedules that show all the videos I have planned going forward. Also, early access to one video a month, where I give patrons access like a couple weeks before I release it to the public. And if you want to donate $10 or more, you can also request videos like this one every time you donate $10 or more. So again, thank you to Quack Addict for your support, and all those who support me on Patreon. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other Star Trek videos, as well as many other shows like Game of Thrones, The Expanse, Lost, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.